There was a college freshman that was in English class, and the professor asked all the kids in the English class, "What is it that you hope to do one day?" And this one guy raised his hand, and he said, "I hope to be a great writer." And the professor said, "Well, amplify on that. What do you mean by great? What is a great writer?" And the kid thought about it, and he said, "Well, I hope that someday I can write something that the world will read, something that is powerful and impactful, something where people will be surprised and maybe they will howl and scream and be excited and question sort of the mystery of what I'm writing." And the professor nodded. Well, that kid, many years later, his job, he works for Microsoft, and he writes error messages. We all want to make a difference with our lives, but whether we actually do is another question. And that's what we're going to look at today. We're doing a series called Our Heart Attitudes. Heart attitudes out in the business world are called sort of our values. Your vision and values, this is sort of our values. And every company has a set of values, whether they can espouse them or not, or put them on print somewhere. But values are important. Values are what helps build community. When you get married, just because you're married does not mean that you're building community with husband and wife. It just doesn't happen willy-nilly. Or when you have children, you're trying to build a family of community where the people enjoy being a part of this family unit, community. That doesn't just happen because people are there. The same is true at work, and the same is true at a church. In any type where you've got more than one person together, community has to be built. And it's built on shared values. And what we're looking at here is what are our 7 shared values that we aspire to live up to. We are trying to continually build as a part of who we are. And these are good values to think about in your marriage or with your family or where you work. Our first one is put the success of others above yourself. And the idea is simply this. We do not want to be a church where sort of the natural instincts of everybody, just as we're relating with each other, is first me and then you. First me, then you. You cannot build a healthy marriage on that, a family, work. All of these things community requires people looking out for other people as a value, not just something in their head. The second one is to live an honest and open life. And here the idea is that community is built on the basis of integrity and honesty. Being honest about life, being honest about hardship, difficulties. These things build trust and goodwill. This is an important part of building a community or a marriage or a family. The third one we looked at last week, clear up relationships. If you've got more than one person in a room, as in at least 2, and they're in a binding relationship, whether at work or in a family or church, with repeated contact, you inevitably are going to have conflict. This is just a part of the human condition. And in a church, this is also true. Conflict is inevitable in the context of binding relationships. The question is not, how can we avoid conflict? The question is, when we do have conflict, how are we going to clear up that conflict? And we looked at that last week. The things we looked at last week are helpful in your marriage or with your teenagers or sometimes the boss or people that work for you at work. And today we're looking at invest your time and talent. Invest your time and talent. In our church, what I ask our people to do who are members is to help pull the wagon. Now, it doesn't matter to me how much you pull the wagon, because all of us have different amounts of time and responsibilities and at different stages of life. But the attitude behind this is what's important. Invest your time and talent. You are helping to pull the wagon. This is, rather than grudgingly serve, we want our people to aspire to want to serve. This is the heart attitude. Now, this issue of investing your time and talent goes to making a difference with our life. And in our culture, present culture, you see on the news almost every night what philosophers call a crisis of meaning. Now, I'm going to give some examples that are current examples of what I see as a crisis of meaning with people. And I am not inferring a political stance when I give these examples. Okay? What I want you to see is individuals or people and what's going on inside of them that creates sort of this almost frantic nature that we see. For example, if you own a Tesla, my son owns a Tesla, and I asked him the other day, have you had your Tesla firebombed recently? Have you checked the paint job to see if it's been keyed? But what you see on the news is sort of this sort of latent urge among some people there's a sort of this frantic nature to want to make a difference somehow. Or there are people that will protest on an interstate highway and try to block the highway. And I'm not saying anything about the cause. But what I'm saying is there's something inside. There's this urge, this human urge, that somehow wants to make a difference with what I do. We had this with college campuses and anti-Semitism last fall especially. There are lots of things like this where if you look at the people, there's almost this, you can see almost this frantic nature to want to make a difference. And when I think about this as people, and I want to talk about us, I think about this sort of has 4 layers to this. The first one is every one of us has a built-in, God-given longing to want to make a difference. This is inescapable. This is where we're different than the rest of the animal kingdom. But your life is meant for meaning. Or we had a friend of ours back in grad school that said we are pregnant with meaning. That's true of human nature. But the second layer of this is more than just I want to make a difference, but there's a sense of which I want to be a part of other people who make a difference. There's a we function here. We want to make a difference. We want our lives to matter. The third layer is that we want to make a difference together that's greater than any of us can make on our own. And the fourth layer is we want to make a difference, that's greater than what we can do on our own that will outlast us. These are God-given longings in the human heart at which we can tap into and which we will find ourselves either frantically looking for meaning or trying to make meaning the way God wants us to. Now, there's a parable here that Jesus said that I would like to use where he tackles this sort of some of the issues that go into this. It's called the parable of the talents. And so what we're going to share here is sort of how does Jesus see this in his story, in story form with a parable. So Matthew 25 is where we'll start. Matthew 25:14. Jesus said, "It is just like a man about to go on a journey, or a master, who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them." So the story, a little bit of the English translation and Greek translation here. He's not talking about chattel slavery, but in the Old Testament days, there were masters and servants, and people became servants for lots of different reasons. Some of them were financial, some of them were legal. But there's an owner of an estate or a ranch, we might say, and he has servants. And entrusted his possessions to them. The one he gave 5 talents, which was about, each talent back then would be about $3,000 today. So he gave about 5 talents to one, 2 to another, 1 according to his ability, and he went on his journey. So he's getting ready to go. We don't know how long he's going to be gone. Jesus doesn't say that, but he tells these guys, while I'm gone, this is what I'm entrusting you to do. Now, we're just told talents. Well, what does that mean? Well, it could have been herds. It could have been farmland. It could have been something he owned or a business. We really aren't, Jesus doesn't tell us the details of this. Immediately, the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who received the 2 talents gained 2 more. But he who received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up, brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have gained 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Now, in the work world, the fellow got a pretty significant promotion. Also, the one who had received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you previously gave 2 talents. I have gained 2 more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. He tells the same commendation to the fellow that only had 2 as he said to the 5. And the reason is that they were faithful with what they had been entrusted. And the one who had the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. And I was afraid, and I went away, and I hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. He gives him back what he had buried. But the master answered and said to him, You wicked, lazy slave. You knew that I reap where I do not sow, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on arrival would have received my money back with interest. Therefore take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has, and here Jesus gives the punchline of the story, for to everyone who has more shall be given more. He will have an abundance. And from the one who does not have, even what he does not have shall be taken away. In other words, what they did with what they've been entrusted matters. There is either blessing or consequence, but it's not up to the master to determine that. It's up to you and me. What have I done with what's been entrusted to me is the moral of the story, the question of the story. Then he says, throw out the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. In this way, in this sense, we may say he lost his job, or he had to file for unemployment in our day and time. So let's look at, there's 6 principles that guide this, that talk about why, and then we'll finish with how. Why invest your time and talent, and some ideas on how. Number 1, the first principle from this parable is the principle of ownership. God owns us. It's not just that he owns what we have, but he owns us. I am not an individual solo accountable to no one. I am accountable to him. The parable starts, it will be, again, like a man going on a journey who called his servants. Now, there's the master who owns the property. There are the 3 particular servants, and each of them are given a God-given designation or an assignment of what they're to do with the master entrusted to him. And the player, or the third sort of group of players here, is the property or the assets that have been entrusted. Psalm 24:1 has the same idea. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world, and all who live in it. We do belong to him. We are his creatures, made by him. Psalm 100 verse 3, know that the Lord is God. It is he who has made us. We are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. That's a very important principle as you and I are about to live our life. Am I just living for me and what's important for me? Now, I do need to live for what's important, but I need to think about what's important to God in terms of what he's entrusted to me, which brings us to the second point. The principle of stewardship. God entrusts us with what is his. He entrusts us with what is his. Verse 14, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. What happens at your work when the boss goes on a trip for a couple of weeks? What happens to the work environment or the work ethic if the boss isn't there? Now, just because the boss isn't there, should that affect the work ethic? All too often it does. And before I became a Christian, I worked at my dad's life insurance company one summer in the mailroom. And whenever the boss wasn't around, after the three of us got the mail out, we sat around playing cards for hours. Now, when we could hear the boss coming down, suddenly the cards disappeared. And we were all acting like we were doing something with the different mail equipment in there. God entrusts us with what is his. We are really good at mine. What's mine is mine. I earned it. And yet, from God's point of view, what we have is his. And even in Deuteronomy, God says, it's I who gave you the ability to create wealth. So even the things that I have purchased out of our Wells Fargo checking account or Discover credit card ultimately come from him. So what's been entrusted to you and me? Your job has been entrusted to you and me. Your paycheck has been entrusted to you and me. Things have been entrusted to you and me. People have been entrusted to you and me. One of these persons you may be married to. You may have some little ones that have been entrusted to you. And in a church setting, our brothers and sisters in Christ have been entrusted to us. How we treat people is really, really important. Not just because that's a good social idea, but because one day I'm going to have to stand before God and answer the question, how did you treat the people that I entrusted to you? And I'm not just talking as a pastor. If I was a church member, I would get the same question someday. I'll get the same question for how did you treat Mindy, my wife, that I entrusted to you, etc. That's the second point. Number 3 on the inside of your handout, the principle of diversity. God gives people different gifts. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and another 1 talent, each according to his ability. 5, 2, and 1. We're not told why, but it does sort of resonate with how life is. We're not all given the same amount of things which we're entrusted with. Now, it's interesting, though, when I think about 5, 2, and 1 here, I think about, I tend to be still, after all these years, a pretty competitive person. And there's times when being competitive is very helpful, and there are times when being very competitive brings misery to me. And we talked about being Pirate fans this morning as just one example of this. But this can also happen professionally when I'm around other pastors. Now, one of the things that I often hear about this topic, about serving the Lord, what can I do, is that my general feeling is that most of us, including me, think, well, what do I have to do? What do I have to give? How can I make a difference? And we sort of go along this line. Well, just because I can't do something big, that means that I really shouldn't do anything. That's how we think. Or if we think about, well, maybe there's something little I could do, we sort of dismiss that as inconsequential. Now, this seems to me to be universal. Not just with people I talk to. If you know me pretty well, you know this is true with me. But it's also amazingly true with some of the heroes of the Old Testament. Like, for example, Moses. When God calls Moses to go to Egypt to bring the people of Egypt out of slavery, Moses' question is, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He's saying, God, you got the wrong guy. I am not qualified to do this. If you feel like you are not qualified to do something for the Lord, welcome to the club. Moses felt that way. Gideon, one of my favorite Old Testament characters, when God comes to Gideon, the Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Midian had been oppressing them for a number of years. And Gideon is like, what? Me? But Lord, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. I think you showed up at the wrong address. Some of you know my story. I became a Christian at age 20, and about a year later, I remember thinking, I wonder if God's calling me into full-time ministry. I'd only been a Christian a year. My favorite page in the Bible was the table of contents. I was still trying to learn where the books of the Bible were and what they were. Where were they? And I remember thinking over a period of several months, as this seemed to be like a possibility, I remember thinking, God, is the kingdom of God this desperate for leadership? I was dumbfounded by this. And all I can say is apparently it was desperate for leadership. The great prophet Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 5, God says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. And Jeremiah's response, similar to mine, sovereign Lord, I did not know how to speak. I am only a child. Now, what do I take from this? There are two things I take from this, both personally and professionally with folks in our church, is that we tend to overestimate the importance of our ability, and we underestimate the importance of our humility. From God's point of view, he would much rather take the humble person who's willing to do something than the person who has all kinds of abilities and strengths and maybe be as proud as a peacock or entitled on what they do. The fourth principle is the principle of accountability. God settles accounts. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. Now, we live in a world, although it seems to me to be sort of fading, where responsibility is teamed with accountability. These two are supposed to go together. The greater the responsibility I have, the greater the accountability I should embrace. The less responsibility I have, the less accountability I need. Now, this is such a part of our world. We hardly even think about this, but it goes on every day. If you've raised children, you hold them accountable for chores in your house. When my kids were little, if they wanted to go out and play on Saturday morning before they had to go out, I'd have to have the same talk with them. Before you go out, you need to do your chores. And they had chores of cleaning the bathroom or picking up toys or whatever it was they had to pick before they went out. That's accountability. We held them accountable for homework. Their teachers held them accountable for homework. Their teachers held them accountable for their behavior in class. And we, as parents, were happy that they did. If my kids came home with a note from the teacher about their attitude, my kids were guilty as charged. There was no question about this, no debate, no calling up the teacher to say, I think you've misinterpreted my child. It's incumbent upon me to help train my children that this is how the world works. And if this is the level of, if this is the area where you get in trouble, you cannot just flirt with the line of trouble and expect it to go well every time. You have to learn to read the situation, read the people in charge, and back away from trouble as you get in. This is just how our world works. I wanted them to learn that in my house before they have to learn that in court or with a drill sergeant or a prison. Principle of accountability. People hold me accountable. I've noticed the IRS expects me to pay my taxes every quarter. And if I don't pay the right amount every quarter, I get dinged at the end of the year for interest and penalty. I've noticed that my electric company, in spite of spiraling costs, still expects me to pay my electric bill every month. And if I don't, they have the ability to turn our electricity off. Accountability. Your boss, if he's a good boss, holds you accountable for work. That's just part of how it is. And we shouldn't be surprised that the same principle holds true with God. We cannot, it's foolish to believe I can do whatever I want to here and somehow escape consequences in this life, and especially when I stand before him. Accountability. The man who had received 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. Romans 14:12 says, each of you will give an account of himself to God. One of the things I anticipate being asked is, what did you do with what I entrusted to you? It's accountability is my helper. It's my reminder of what's important. The fifth principle is the principle of reward. God rewards us for our investments. In the parable, the master tells both the first two fellows the same commendation. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Now, one of the things that's true for all of us, and this is part of the hunger for meaning, is there's also a hunger with that for validation. We all have that. That's just a part of your everyday life, whether you're aware of it or not. And all of us look for other people to validate us. And there's nothing wrong when somebody else, like your wife or your kids or friends or people in church, validates something you did. But we make a mistake when we expect that validation from our spouse or our children or people at work or people at church. And then we get angry when it doesn't come. That part is on us. Now, how does God use that? He uses it to say, duh, I am expecting my spouse or my kids to fill up this huge amount of cavern in me of validation when they just have about this much that they can put in there. What that's meant to do is to turn our eyes upward and to serve God, who's the one in the parable, who is the owner. And we are the servants. It's meant to point us upward for a validation that no person, no matter how good they are, can give us. And there are four elements in Jesus' response in this parable to these two fellows that really strike me. The first is the element of impact. What he's telling these guys is what you did. He's talking about what they did was important. Your life made a difference, and in this sense, they were affirmed. And looking to God, this is where we get this. Last night, we had a marriage night. We're going to do one in another month. And if you missed that, I'd encourage you to go. But one of the things that's really cool about this is Richard and Allie shared a little snippet of their story about marriage. And it's a great story. But their story, for the folks who were in that room last night, were like seeds. And they were planted in a husband and a wife around the room, each like little seeds. And those seeds, likely, for the people who were teachable last night, those seeds have a chance to grow inside of the people that Richard and Allie shared their testimony with. And it's likely that those seeds, if received, have a chance to bear fruit in your marriage. And not just your marriage, but in your children. This is part of kind of the wonder of a church. The teaching doesn't just happen on Sunday morning at 9:30. The second is influence. Who you are. Someone was influenced, and there's a sense of appreciation. I read this also in Jesus' response here to this. When our oldest daughter was going through a really rough patch, I think it was in high school, we had a lady in our church named Polly that had befriended her. And I think she went over to Polly's house maybe a couple times a week to do homework together. And it wasn't just to do homework, but it was sort of a place of refuge for my daughter. And it was a really, really important relationship. It wasn't something that happened on Sunday morning, happened in church, but it was a part of church life out there. And it relates to this thing of influence. She had a significant influence in my daughter's life. The third principle here is investment. What you did was worth it. And there's extra privilege, reward, acquisition, sort of implied in the story here. And when I think of this, years ago, we had a couple, Robert and Debbie Hall, who were part of our church, and they had another amazing marriage story. But part of what Robert did is once a month he taught over in the children's area. And one of the things the boys over there loved was he brought baseball cards with him. And he would pass out baseball cards. He was a huge Cubs fan. and pass out baseball cards. I don't think he gave any of his Cubs cards away. But my son would come home with baseball cards, and you would have thought he won the lottery. Now, something happens in that relationship of what we're talking about here. And then intimacy is the fourth one. There's affection, why you did what you did. There's a shared joy. Come and share your master's happiness. All of these things are part and parcel of what we hunger for as people. And what God is saying to the people he's telling this parable, he says, if you get who the master is and you serve him, you're on the right track. You're on the right train, down the right track. The last principle here is the principle of loss. God removes what we will not invest. Now, it's amazing to me that the third fella in this, he is the master of rationalizing, justifying himself, and excuses. And I relate to him. The man who had received the 1 talent came, master. And then I can just imagine him sort of this magnanimous state. I knew that you're a hard man. Now, what he's doing is a backhanded slap. He's telling him, you're really not a fair fellow. Harvesting where you've not sown, gathering where you have not scattered. In other words, I've seen, it looks to me, from my point of view, like you're unjust. Now, this is not a statement about the master. It's a statement about him. The eyes that he has chosen to look out through and evaluate the master. So, and here's the justification. I was afraid and went out and hid your talent, just like any honest person like me would do, in the ground. So here is what belongs to you. I dug it up and brought it back to you. Now, that's one way of how he looked at himself. The question is, how did Jesus look at him? And it's not the same. Verse 26, you wicked, lazy servant. He drops the hammer on this fella. He shatters the illusion that the man wants to live behind. Take the talent from him, give it to the one who has 10 talents. Throw the worthless servant outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, the issue here is not a matter of time. From Jesus' point of view, it's a moral issue. You wicked, lazy servant. Not a matter of time. Not a matter of convenience or comfort. A moral issue. On the back side of your handout, let's just do five ways of how I can invest my life. Invest your time. Obviously one. Be careful then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Meaning there's a lot of room to do a lot of work out there in the world we live in. Take advantage of opportunities. Next is invest your talents. And the idea here is our spiritual gifts. God has given every Christian at least one spiritual gift. The idea is use it. The third one, invest your treasure. We'll talk about this in a couple weeks. Number 4, invest your tongue. And here I think about conversations. Part of what is important in a church is everybody here has a life story. And we have a current story. And church is not like going to the movies where we come and we see the show, we go to the parking lot, and we go, well, how was the show? Church is about people in relationship. And your story matters. And it needs to matter to some other people. And for our members, we ask you to listen to people's stories and engage with them. We need other people to engage with our stories. This is one of the ways you can invest your life. For some people in our church, they make phone calls. Just checking up on you. How you doing? That's an example of this one. The last one, invest your thoughtfulness. There's a difference between making a difference and living for our comfort and convenience. There's sort of this seesaw that goes back and forth. I want to make a difference, but I want to be comfortable and I want to do what's convenient. And all of us sort of ride this seesaw. But one of the things I want to encourage you with is this principle of little. It's the little things we do that turn out to be the biggest things. I don't care how big a thing you do. If you pick up a little thing to do that and do it, you're pulling the wagon. It's the little things over a long period of time that matter. I like the story of when the Super Bowl was going on. Unbeknownst to most of us, there was another football game going on. And it was the big animals against the little animals. And during the first half, the big animals were creaming the little animals. And at halftime, the coach of the little animals was beside himself. How can I motivate a thoroughly defeated team to come back for the second half? And the second half, they went out on the field, and the big animals had the ball first. And on first down, the elephant was stopped at the line of scrimmage. It was like, wow. And on second down, the rhinoceros was stopped at the line of scrimmage. Wow. And on third down, the hippopotamus was sacked for a 10-yard loss. And the coach was beside himself. And the defense came off the field, and he gathered them over. And he said, who stopped the elephant at the line of scrimmage? And the little centipede said, I did. Wow. So, well, who stopped the rhinoceros at the line of scrimmage? And the little centipede said, I did that too. Well, who sacked the hippopotamus 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage? And the centipede said, I did that too. And the coach looked at him and said, where were you in the first half, Mr. Centipede? And he said, I was in the locker room getting my ankles taped. I don't think God's going to ask us how big a thing we did, but that we pulled the wagon the best as we could given our situation in life. Let's pray together. Father, it's possible to, as we mentioned at the first of the message, to be seeking meaning in things that really don't matter that much or lesser than importance. And it's also easy for us as people to sort of fritter away our life, chasing trivia and trinkets and treasure. But we only have a certain amount of time. Would you help us to invest our life in the things that matter? Help us to see that everything we have has been entrusted to us, that we have the opportunity to serve you by how we steward all the different things and people and opportunities and schooling, all the things that we've been given to make a difference. Help us to see these things today. If you've never pulled the wagon, for some of you, let me encourage you, metaphorically, reach out, grab the wagon.